Hey guys, welcome back to this episode of Mr. Gabriel's Auto Talk. And so I was telling you guys earlier this week that I was going to show you kind of what I was doing with my hot rod to improve the sound system a little bit. And I know you guys, a lot of you with your cars, you're going to want to do the same thing. So let me go over a little bit about what I did, and some of this should refresh your memory from when we went over audio systems. Okay, so here's my little Model A. And the problem that I had with it was this factory Kenwood stereo that I had, this stereo right here. This little thing, it only puts out like, I don't know, 20 watts a channel, and so it says 20 watts. It ain't really 20 watts. Truth be told, it's probably more like about 8 or 10 watts a channel. And so my speakers, if you see over there, I've got these Cadence speakers, and they're discontinued now, but they're really a good speaker because they're a slim profile. They don't, the depth in the back where the magnet's at, it has a big magnet, but the depth is not that deep. They're what they call a low profile or slimline series. And so I like them because they fit in my little kick panels really good and not take up a lot of room. And of course I have them fairly well insulated in there so that when they do bounce with the bass, they don't vibrate everything. But the problem that I had was this Kenwood stereo that I got, it just didn't put out enough to really push them speakers. I think them speakers, which we'll look here at the sheet here in a minute, but they're rated at like, I think it's 70 watts a channel or something. Let's go back and look. Let's look and see real quick. I wrote it down so that we'd know. Okay, 60 watts. So these Cadence speakers, they're rated at 60 watts RMS. Now, of course, if you look them up, they tell you that they're 120 watt peak power. But as I was telling you guys in audio systems, RMS is what you want to look at. So these speakers, they're two-way speakers. They've got a Kevlar cone, and their range, they can cover 90 hertz to 22,000 hertz. And of course, I was telling you guys 90 hertz, that's your low frequency. So that's going to be your bass. That's your bass. And if you remember right, I was teaching you guys that your low bass signals are going to be 100 hertz and below. Of course, some of you guys give me the wrong answer. You're trying to Google that stuff, and you're not getting the answers I'm looking for. And if you remember right, I was telling you that your sound pressure, when you look at that, your SPL, that's going to be how loud the speaker can get. And so this one's a 92 decibel, which is good for what I want. I'm an old man. I don't need something that's popping my glass in and out of my car. But a couple other things I was going to show you guys. So I like things to match. So I got a Kenwood amplifier to match my Kenwood stereo. And this thing, it says it's a 500 watt amp. Well, you got to look. It's not really 500 watts. If you look, it's 70 watts times 2 at 2 channels. And that's your RMS. That's what we want. We want the rated power output, not peak power. So if I look, my speakers, if you run them in stereo, 2 of them, you're going to get 70 watts a channel RMS. That's your RMS times 2. So if my speakers are rated at 60 watts RMS and my amplifier is putting out 70 watts, no, I'm not going to blow the speakers. There's a possibility if you just cranked it completely loud, but the idea is you don't want to wear this amplifier out trying to push your speakers. If you have a speaker that's rated at, say, 60 watts RMS and your little amplifier is only rated at 40 watts RMS, you're going to overheat this thing. It's going to get so hot trying to push that speaker, this thing's going to run hot. Your amplifier won't last long. If you match your equipment pretty good, which I do, I have this rated just a little bit higher than my speakers, and that's what I told you guys. This amplifier doesn't have to work very hard to push this speaker. You won't overheat this thing. Of course, you've got to mount this thing so you can get some good airflow across it so you don't run it hot. So that's what I ended up doing was I mounted it here because, of course, this is kind of wasted space. There's nothing I can really put between the gas tank and my trunk. I do keep a blanket and I keep a 4-way wrench, but other than that, I didn't want to waste any of my space up on top of this area or back in these corners, because both of these corners I use to store stuff. So this was a good spot to mount it. And so really the closer you can get it to the battery, the better off you are too. Now most of you guys, your batteries are going to be under the hood. They're not going to be under the trunk unless, you know, you're building a race car or something. But typically race cars, we do put batteries in the back, and we normally have a kill switch. Now I don't have a kill switch, but I have a main circuit breaker, and that's rated at 80 amps, which I don't have a whole lot of things on the car, but that just protects my complete electrical system. And a couple of the things I wanted to show you guys is, as I've taught you before, if you notice, remember I told you guys that this is always the best way to do it. These are all soldered. All of my eyelets are soldered onto my wires, even my speakers. Now, of course, if you notice, I didn't use the RCA jack, so let's talk about that just a minute. Since I have an equalizer booster in my car, I'll show you that here in a minute. Let me open up the door and I'll show you. I'm old school, so I love these old equalizers. So I have this equalizer here, and even though the stereo's rated at like, say, 20 watts, I think this thing's rated at like 40. So for me to be able to use it, I have to wire the stereo to the equalizer. Of course, now I need an amplifier, so I'm wiring the equalizer to the amplifier in the trunk. Well, since I'm using that equalizer, when you use these RCA jacks on your amplifiers, that's for a low signal. In other words, a signal, say, straight out of your stereo, where we know your stereo don't put out but 7 or 10 watts a channel. So if I wasn't running the equalizer, I could use these RCA jacks. And matter of fact, I think it even tells you that's your line in, but it's your low line in. Since I'm running a little bit higher level coming in off that equalizer, I need to use this one over here. This is the SP level, so it's basically a little bit higher of a signal. Now, of course, over here there's a dial that I can turn up or turn down, and that's the sensitivity. If you look, see it says input sensitivity. So you can make it very sensitive to signals coming in or make it less sensitive to signals coming in. I've got mine set about 3/4 of the way. I don't want it full, and I don't want it, you know, low either. That way I don't have to turn the stereo up very loud on the volume knob to get a good sound out of the speakers. Now the other thing is, if you look up here at the top, there's what they call a low pass filter. If you notice, it says off and then filter, low pass filter. Now what that does is, let's say I was using this amplifier, because I could bridge these two together, and that way I would really have 140 watt RMS, and I could use that to push a subwoofer. Now if I was just using a subwoofer, then I would probably want to flip the switch over to the low pass. That way only the low frequencies, like we talked about, only the low frequencies are going to go to the subwoofer. They're not going to go to everything. Now in my case, I'm using the amplifier to push two 6x9 speakers. I want it to amplify all of my signals, my lows and my highs. So that's why I have the low pass filter switch off, because I want everything running through here. Now one of the things that I had, and some of you guys may have this, you may find this is going to be a problem when you start putting your stereo systems in your car. I run what they call a wideband sensor. Even though I run a carbureted engine, I run what we call a wideband sensor, and that helps me get my carburetor tuned right, because what it does is that wideband sensor, when I'm driving down the road, I can monitor my air-fuel ratio and my exhaust. If you look down here in my header, see I've got this oxygen sensor or wideband sensor, and so what it does is it monitors like whatever my carburetor's doing up here. If my engine's running rich or running lean, I can tell from that sensor. Of course, the gauge mounted on the inside, I can monitor it when I drive. And so what it does is when you start it up, there's a heater inside here, or a heater inside the sensor. And so it heats that sensor up so we can get a good reading. Well, the problem is, since this unit is so close to my stereo, before I was getting a little bit of noise. So when I turned my key on, you could hear that heater through the stereo system warming up. You know, it would make like a kind of a buzzy tone, and it would just keep going up, and then it would drop off. And of course, it's kind of annoying. So some of you guys, you're going to find that when you put an amplifier in your car, what's going to happen is you're going to amplify all signals. So if you have an alternator and you're running wires kind of close together, you might pick up that alternator. You'll notice that when you rev your car up or you take off and you're accelerating, you'll hear that buzzing coming through your stereo system from your engine, from your alternator. So let me show you a trick that you guys can do. I've got one cable already done that I ended up not using, but what you can do is, let's say that you're wiring your stereo up and you're going from your radio to the amplifier, okay? Well, that amplifier is going to amplify all the signals that it gets. So that's where you're going to get your alternator noise at. So a cheap trick you can do that don't cost no money is take, and on the outside of this cable, that's going to be your ground. That's your negative side, your return side of your sound system. Take and solder you a little wire on it. And of course, what I did was to I took just one piece of wire and soldered it to both terminals, and then I put it to one terminal. What you're going to do is you're going to put this to ground. So, and it doesn't hurt anything. Now, don't solder it to the center one, solder it to the outside one. If you look here, I got it soldered in. And what you're doing is you're making your own filter system for your speakers. And of course, you can go out there and buy the stuff aftermarket. They call it a ground loop. That's what they call it. And so you can buy these little boxes, cost you 30, 40 bucks, and they call it a ground loop isolator. Well, let me tell you, you can save yourself some money just doing this yourself. Just put you a couple of wires, twist them around it, solder it to the end. If you don't have a solder gun, that's fine. You can twist it around there, wrap you some electrical tape so it stays on nice and tight. Me, I like it soldered so I don't have to worry about a bad connection. But if you twist that wire around it, twist it up real good, then on the other end of this, just put it to ground. Put it to your chassis ground or something. Now what's going to happen is any excessive noise that you get into your speaker cables, it's going to go to ground and not get sent to your amplifier. Because if you take that noise that's in this input wire and you put it into that amplifier is going to amplify all the signals that it gets. Not just what your stereo's putting out, but whatever noise that you get transmitted on that cable. So that amplifier is going to amplify all of it. You're going to get that buzzing sound in your speakers because your amplifier is amplifying the signal. So if you ground that out, that'll work. Now the other thing too is you make sure, you know, this thing has its own fuse right here, but you don't want to take the chance on damaging the amplifier if for some reason you wire it up and don't do it exactly right. I have another fuse right here because I'm coming right off of my relay, and I've got it on the other side. That way, if I flip my switch, there's no power going to it. I don't like leaving power on these cars when you don't drive them that much. We were talking about cars that are, you know, kind of fun cars, luxury cars, not cars you drive all the time. So having some type of a battery kill switch is a good thing to have. For one, it's a deterrent from thieves, and two, you can go to bed at night and not worry about, you know, your barn or garage catching on fire because you had an electrical short in your car overnight. So anyway, hopefully, you know, I was telling you guys that I'd show you the updates after I got it all installed in there and explain some of what this stuff is on these amplifiers. And I know some of you was telling me that you plan on doing a stereo system in your car. And so hopefully this will give you a few little bonus pointers to learn and understand about. So just make sure you do a good job running your wires. Make sure that they're not anywhere that's going to get shorted out on your frame and cause an electrical short. So anyway, all right guys, I just wanted to update you on the little hot rod and the little amplifier project I did. And I want you guys to update me too. Go ahead and show me what you're working on. I want to see what you guys are doing at home and whatnot, because like I said before, this is a hands-on class, so I want you to show me what you've been working on, man. Let's work on some hot rods. So all right, y'all have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.